Now, for more on the outcome of the Republican National Convention, let's bring in Ed Butowsky, his managing partner at Chapwood Investment Management and a Trump supporter. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I just came back this morning from the RNC, so it was an exciting time, to say the least.
Now, being that you have this very fresh perspective, in terms of the reaction from the business community among the delegates, how was the convention received?
You know, it's interesting. I really think that's a great question, because the business community itself has sat for a long time hoping for something new to come along, because, you know, you hear these talking points from people all the time that there's so much rules and regulation and that tampers down a lot of growth, and it really is true. So around the community that I was hearing was some hope of something new to break, because we've had a lot of years of, you know, not just taxes, but just the unknown of what's coming around the corner next out of the administration that's in place now. So something new is something that everyone is looking forward to.
And speaking of something new, you were talking about people in the community. Now, Cleveland used to be this former industrial powerhouse that saw its economy crumble as the jobs disappeared. Now, you have Trump's message of all these better trade deals that he's trying to lay out or perhaps renegotiate. What do you think the response has been there?
Yeah, another great question, but there's the difference here. What happened in the Rust Belt has a lot to do with unions. Unions are very inflationary because, you know, they negotiate higher prices, and anything that you see that's been built through a union normally costs a little bit more. So Cleveland, Detroit, and other cities up there suffered through that. In terms of renegotiating trade deals, you know, it really depends on what trade deal. But if you sat and looked at how much we are in a trade deficit with a lot of countries, you'd be shocked at those numbers. I mean, Mexico alone is a huge trade deficit of about $50 billion a year. And that's somewhat surprising because we export so much, but we're actually importing a lot more from outside the U.S. So each one has to be looked at separately, but they must be looked at because the United States is really losing that game across the board.
And as you mentioned, these trade deals being something of a sticking point, what are the chances then that we'll hear something similar along the lines of getting better trade deals from the Democratic National Convention next week in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I don't know what is going to come out of that. I think it's going to be a lot of, wow, we're doing well, and let's just keep doing what we're doing. And, you know, they have to put some numbers to that, because when you really start to look at the numbers and not just the rhetoric and get specific, for instance, they say that we've had a lot of jobs growth. Well, we've had consistent months of jobs, but they don't talk about how many we need each month to offset our deficit. That's what I look for, is specifics. And I think tonight, everyone in this country is going to hear a lot of specifics from Donald Trump. From next week in the DNC, I just don't know what's going to come out of that.
Now, Ed, you mentioned jobs, and yesterday's theme was actually Make America Work Again. But in terms of the actual policies that Trump has laid out, what do you think he's actually going to do to achieve that?
Well, it's very difficult to put in real layman's terms, but when you cut taxes, and we hear this all the time, and I sound like everybody else, but when you do, you leave more money in companies' pockets, individuals' pockets, to allow them to do with that money with it what they want to, allow them to be creative and run their own businesses. So the first step is going to have to be get rid of the undue and unnecessary regulations. Then take the money that we can use from cutting taxes and then be more entrepreneurial with that. It has a multiplier effect. The problem is, and this is what I'm cautious about, is that it takes a little while. So we're not going to see it, you know, immediately start to happen. Anytime you see tax cuts, it takes a while. The question is, can this country continue to, you know, prosper, or begin to prosper, I should say, during a time when we're waiting for those tax cuts to start to find its way into, in a positive way, into the economy. That's what I'm concerned about with Donald Trump's plan, is the timing.
Now, Ed, in terms of some of these unanswered economic issues that are on the Trump-Pence ticket, on top of that, you also have people who are somewhat put off by some of his controversial comments. How does he bridge that gap? How does he then reach out to the voters who may feel alienated or just really aren't sure about him and see him as more of a wild card?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are a lot of things he has said that has alienated people. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, I'm as tough as they come, but he says some things and I go, whoa, did he really just say that? But then there's other things that he didn't say. And a lot of people will take, just like that game operator, and say something, and it's a little different. I mean, he's never said the things that a lot of the people talking about immigration have said, but people in this country have gone to whatever could hurt them the most or whatever is easiest to repeat. That's what they say is the truth. But he is going to have to start to change his ways, and he started to. You've seen it over the last 2 or 3 months. He's calmed down a little bit, became a little bit more professional, reading from a teleprompter, and before you know it, people are going to ignore those things, which sometimes I can't believe. I can't, I don't know about you, but personally, I have a hard time ignoring things that someone said to me that hurt my feelings. But somehow this country does that, and hopefully they'll focus just on the policies. And when they do that, they'll start to accept him a little more. And hopefully that will start to happen.
Well, we'll have to leave it there, but certainly some things are written in ink, especially when they're on the internet. Thank you so much for joining us, Ed Butowsky, Managing Partner at Chapwood Investment Management.